I think that the moment he brought up this idea of a meta operating system, my mind was just sort of blown. This idea of thinking of getting rid of apps is just hard to think about. I mean, I'm just still trying to figure out how to learn Windows 8, frankly. And so getting rid of an operating system is mind-blowing. Our next speaker is also someone who has really, really pushed the sort of depths of thinking that people have done around designing things and engineering things. We have Zach Kaplan, who is the CEO of Inventables. His Twitter handle, by the way, if you want to tweet him questions, is ZKaplan. I know it's always nice for the speakers to get feedback and send direct questions to them. Just a little bit about Zach. He's the CEO of Inventables, a hardware marketplace with over 30,000 products for designers and engineers. Prior to Inventables, he created Leverworks, a custom web app and hosting company. And since then, Zach has actually spoke at TED and has been covered by Businessweek, Fortune, Forbes, CNN, NPR, and pretty much every major media outlet. And he's sort of deemed as the modern inventor. Zach's a really cool guy. I've actually had a chance to get to know him in the coming days and weeks prior to the conference. And he was actually honored by Chicago's Museum of Science and Industry as the modern Leonardo da Vinci, and currently sits on the advisory committee for the Fast Forward exhibit. So let's give it up, a nice, warm Kansas City welcome for Zach Kaplan, the CEO of Inventables.
How you guys doing? So Inventables is the designer's hardware store, and my infatuation, curiosity with hardware stores came when I was in grade school. So I'm sure if you guys are in technology, you went to the hardware store when you were little. And I started in grade school. My parents would take me. It was either the Ace Hardware right by our house, the True Value that was downtown in the suburb I grew up in, or Home Depot. And I would go into these stores with an idea in mind that I wanted to design a product. And I wanted my products to look just as good as the products I would see on the shelves in the real stores, like Target or Walmart, whatever. And invariably, my strategy was to go in and find the oldest guy I could in the store, because he knew the most, and I didn't really know anything, and explain and paint the best picture of what I was trying to build so he could help me. And we'd walk up and down the aisles, and invariably, no matter what store it was, I would run into the same problem, which was they just didn't have the stuff that I needed. So I vividly remember standing at Home Depot with this guy, and I really wanted to build a go-kart out of a old dresser that my parents were giving away. And I'm trying to get him to help me find the wheels, and he's like, I'm sorry, all we have is these. And I'm like, well, how am I going to attach the axle? And he's like, I'm like, how do people do it normally? And he's like, these are for a lawnmower. They just screw them on. And it was just an internal frustration. So this is how this frustration started. So my parents, specifically my dad, always got, this is my brother and myself, so I'm on the right there, about 5 years old. And my parents always bought us construction toys, Legos, Tinker toys. Every construction toy that was available, we had. And a couple of years ago, I asked my dad, like, why did you do this? And he's like, I don't know, they make you think. It's better than a truck. And I was really obsessed with things like constructs. And I would build these worlds and think of, like, in my mind, I had built the Sears Tower. And my mom would look at it and be like, that looks great. And so this frustrated me. I was like really frustrated. Why didn't mine look real? And so later on, I started to realize, like, despite the fact that it didn't look real, companies like Lego had reduced down the complexity of building something to this brick. And this brick made it easy to succeed. It was almost like a scaffolding for my imagination. And when I was preparing for this talk, I actually thought about the fact that that brick was like a digit. It was almost like Lego had made building something digital. And it wasn't until later in my life when I met this guy. So this is Peter Skillman. I studied mechanical engineering in the University of Illinois in Champaign-Urbana. I was totally infatuated with this company called IDEO. So IDEO, for those of you who don't know, designs, they're like a product design consultancy. So they've designed everything from the first Apple mouse to some of the Palm devices. So Peter worked at IDEO, and he was actually in the Nightline video where IDEO redesigned a shopping cart. And when I was in college, my parents sent me I guess at that time it was a cassette tape, or the VHS tape of this thing, and Peter was in there, and I just thought, wow, this is the coolest thing ever. I want to like work in doing something like that. And so later on, Inventables ended up working with Palm, and so I got to work with Peter on a daily basis, and Peter had this strategy where he would just go out, and he was a very curious guy, and just try to find and learn about all these different materials, as many as he could, because then he'd run into issues. And so I introduced Peter. Peter had this issue where did anybody have the handspring, the first handspring, or the first Palm? Do you remember the docking station? So those docking stations were about as light as a feather, and the cord would just like whip it off the table. So it turned out this is really bad for them. And it was really bad because people would send in their broken screen, and this was costing hundreds of thousands of dollars for them to replace it because it was a defect. And so Peter had this problem, and I introduced him to the suction cup tape. So it's like normal tape, but it's not sticky. It's just suction cup. So if you look at it under a microscope, there's little divots in there, and the suction cups stick to the glass. So Peter saw this, and instantly it made a connection in his head that for the next version of their docking station, they could put it on the bottom. So this is what the final product looked like. It was the Touchstone. And then there you see they used the black version. They cut it like a donut. It was about 3 cents worth of material. And then the whole thing goes on your desk. So
hello, everybody. PreCentral.net here. We're going to give you a quick look at the Touchstone charging dock.
So this is the review.
It's pretty slick. It's got, it's got a nice heft to it. It's just got a single port on the back to plug your micro USB cable into. And then it comes with a battery door if you buy the $70 version. You see a couple of battery contacts there and 4 magnets and a nice matted back, much better than the fingerprint magnet that comes on the Pre by default. And it's got this really nice sort of sticky bottom. It's based on gecko feet or whatever. So let's cut away real quick. I just want to show you just how strong that bottom is as long as you keep it clean. So here it is, the window outside my office, and I'll show you the bottom here. And bang, out of focus here, so we'll back up just a bit. And yeah, it sticks just fine. Don't get it too dirty, and I guess I wouldn't recommend that you do this, but if you really wanted to, I suppose it would hold up for at least a while until it fell. So yeah, the dock, lifting the Pre off of it, not a problem.
So we had them on the windows in our office just to see, and it lasted like 2 years. So Palm actually got bought before the thing fell down. So that whole process took 2 years, from the time I was sitting in their conference room to the time that this was announced at CES. 2 years. Shortly after that, these two guys, so this is Anthony and Russ. Anthony emails me, and they had just graduated, one from IIT in Chicago and the other from UIC. And they're both engineers. They're both working on doing a startup, trying to figure out, both of them were gamers, and they loved gaming. And the iPhone had just come out, and they were playing game, like when it came out, you guys remember all the games were all the rage. And they had this issue where if you're a hardcore gamer, shoot 'em up games, it's hard to do on a touch screen. Because how do you like kill somebody with like a touch screen? There was like no joystick. So these guys had this idea, we're going to make a joystick for the iPhone, and I think the iPad too. It was like basically for touch screens. They went through all the R&D. They were the customer. They loved it. They're like actually just doing this on the side. They had just gotten their first job. And so Anthony emails me, and at the time, Inventables only works with enterprise customers. Black & Decker, Procter & Gamble, Palm. So this guy emails me from his Gmail, and he's like, I saw this suction cup thing. I think it would work for our joystick. Can you contact the vendor? Can I meet you? Can I get some samples? And I'm like, who is this guy? So I email him back, and I'm like, hey, man, here's the info, and let me know if I can help anymore. It sounds like a cool project. And I expect him to go away and never come back. So 3 months later, he comes back, and he explains that they have integrated the suction cup tape and another technology, the conductive rubber, into the joystick, and they are very interested in a quote for a role. I'm like, okay. How interested are you? And he's like, well, we're preparing for the production. I'm like, okay. So I email him a quote, but like he doesn't have a company. He's still at the Gmail thing. And I expect him to go away again. So then he emails me this picture, and he's like, no, we really have a prototype. Like, this is real. I'm like, OK. Looks cool. And 3 months later, maybe 2 months later, he calls back, and he's like, OK, we want to place our order. Our Kickstarter just ended, and we're funded. We need to deliver 3,000 joysticks. This whole process took 6 months. He actually paid for the roll, and they actually shipped from Asia to his manufacturing facility the suction cup tape, and I was completely blown away. But two guys who had never launched a product before in their entire life got it funded on Kickstarter, ordered material, and shipped it to 3,000 customers. And I had just done this with Peter Skillman, who in my mind was like at the top of the world here, in 2 years. So this like knocked me off my rocker, and I started thinking, okay, the world is changing. And our mission in Inventables was to help companies innovate. And when I saw this, I was like, we were in no position to help these guys. They couldn't pay us. Something was wrong. So I started thinking and telling everybody I knew what had just happened. And one of my friends who lives out in the valley said, this sounds just like 1984, 1985 with the desktop publishing. I'm like, what are you talking about? And he's like, well, we used to tell the story that a computer used to be the size of a room, and now, obviously, it's the size of a phone or just your desktop. It used to be in the music industry, you needed huge soundboards, and now it's all software on Pro Tools. And the same thing, printing presses you have to have a commercial press, and now everybody could get a DeskJet if you want, but the only thing we print is our boarding passes, and sometimes we don't even print those. So the same thing was happening in manufacturing that was happening in all of these other industries. And the guy who told me, he's actually like on the side, like during the day he has web startups, but on the side he's built like a music studio, so he was just so tuned into it. And he actually worked at Apple in the 80s. So he's like, yeah, this is the same thing. So I started doing more research, and I called suppliers, our suppliers, but also the suppliers of machines, to try to understand what was going on in terms of cost. And one of the guys I called, he was a sales rep for a laser cutter machine company. And he said, I actually started with this company in 1991, and the average machine that was sold back then was about $250,000. He's like, about 10 years in, it was pretty exciting that it was about $25,000. And then today, the entry-level machine in the industry is about $2,300 bucks. And I was like, whoa. So I started looking into the prices of other machines. So in the span of 20 years, prices dropped, or the mean entry-level machine dropped from $250,000 to $2,500 or $2,300 bucks. And this was happening across all sorts of different machines. So I started thinking about the fact that just like what's going on with the cloud, just like what's going on with consumer software, just like what's going on with the internet, is happening with factories just a little bit slower. And what we're seeing is factories are moving from these ugly, dirty, massive places that are sort of unfriendly and scary to these small little boxes and machines that you can have anywhere. Almost like a network of factories as opposed to these monolith factories. So I call this the move from the factory to the desktop. And so this is actually the IDEO office in Chicago. And I believe that the future of factories is actually going to look more like this. Design offices, and we're seeing a separation of what used to have a designer and an engineer and a factory person all in the same company. Now they can be anywhere in the world. And so we started looking into digital manufacturing. So this idea that you can just manufacture through your computer. Who's doing it now? It's not new. It's been around for at least 20 years. On the left side, there's about 38,000 sign shops in America, and they've been doing digital manufacturing for at least a decade. Educational institutions have also been in on the game, and wherever you went to school, you probably had a fab lab or a laser cutter, and they'd been doing CNC. When I was in high school, we had a CNC mill. It wasn't $600 bucks, but it was there. What's new is all the stuff on the right side. Independent designers. So 10 years ago, Etsy didn't exist. But there's now over 1 million pieces of jewelry for sale on Etsy, and many of them are using digital fabrication. And custom furniture makers, all the houses and all the small boutique retail shops, everybody wants something unique. And so now they're using digital manufacturing to get this done because it's accessible and cheap, and it's friendly. So we started seeing all of these things. So those two guys launched their Kickstarter, Etsy launches, Fab.com launches, Amazon launches, where they'll do Amazon fulfillment. You just ship them your stuff, and they'll ship it for you. And all these little boutique shops are popping up in Chicago selling these digitally manufactured goods done by local artisans. And so I start making a Pinterest board, just typing in like laser cut product, and this is what I start finding. People are making shoes, and people are making wallets, and cupcake holders, and lamps, and purses, and skateboards. And I'm like, Jesus, all of this stuff is happening, and it's not happening at Procter & Gamble or Black & Decker. It's happening in Kansas City and Philadelphia and Chicago, and it's happening not in a factory, but it's happening in the suburbs in people's bedrooms or basements. And so I start getting deeper into why is this happening. And so 20 years ago, if you wanted CAD software, you're talking about maybe $20,000 or $30,000. Today, the professional grade ones cost $10,000. But there's consumer grade CAD packages that are free in browser, no download. So this is a screenshot from Tinkercad, but Autodesk has Autodesk 123D. And anyone here can go to their website right now and for free get access to CAD. At Inventables, we sell the least expensive CNC mill in the world. It's $600. If you're a real hardcore hacker, you can get the mechanical platform for $225 and roll your own electronics. But if you're just a normal person, $600 is like the entry. Everybody's heard of 3D printing now, which is amazing. 3D printing has actually been around for at least 20 years, maybe even more. But now you can get, so the solid doodle is $500. This is the new MakerBot that just came out. It's about $2,000. And then laser cutting, the entry-level laser is about $2,000. And so all of this is driving the fact that people are everywhere in the country buying these machines and then starting a business because you can just get access to the designs for free online or make them yourself for free. It's just about your ambition. So this is a video of somebody who bought the mill and set it up and started manufacturing. So it's unclear if you could see what he's making there, but in the next photo, you can see he actually made 3 of them. Anybody know what it is yet? Yep. So he made a skateboard. And when I show people this, they say, yeah, but you can't ride it. And so I made him take a picture riding it. So if you go back, the piece of wood cost him about $30. And he said he was able to get 6 boards out of the wood. The most expensive part was the trucks. And he said you can buy trucks anywhere from about $30 to $85. So he bought the $85 ones because he wanted to be cool. And he's like, I go to the store and look at equivalent boards and they're $200, $300. It's unbelievable that a volume of 6, he is manufacturing, his cost of goods sold is on par with the manufacturer who's selling millions of boards or hundreds of thousands of boards. I'm not sure how many boards are sold in this country at scale. And he's making 6 with a $700 machine. He upgraded it so you could do more boards. That took 1 day. So 2 years, 6 months, 1 day. 2 years, 6 months, 1 day. When I heard this story, so I didn't even know he did this. He just posted it back onto the forum, and somebody forwarded it to me and said, hey man, have you seen the skateboard? I'm like, what? And he posted the video to YouTube and like put it on the forum. And I emailed the guy, he writes back, like, yeah, you want one? So he sent us one. So in Chicago, the Museum of Science and Industry has this place called the Fab Lab. So this guy at MIT, Neil Gershenfeld, would like to see basically manufacturing and fabrication facilities in every city in the world on a local level. If you don't have one yet in Kansas City, you're probably going to get one soon. But so that guy on the right, his name is Dan Meyer, and Dan is this totally awesome guy who's in charge of the lab. And he's constantly giving tours and classes, and you see, like right there, they have their 2 laser cutters. To the left, they have a vinyl cutter. There's 2 CNC mills. And they bring in kids of all ages. So you got the little kid there. You got the big kids. Everybody is enamored with this place, and it's totally free. You just go to the museum. If you volunteer, they'll let you use the machines for free. And people are creating great stuff. And what we see happening is people realize once they get their first taste, they can actually make a business on making and selling these products. The challenge that they run into, and this is actually something that Dan first voiced to me, was that finding all the materials and supplies is kind of challenging. Because the establishment, the people who had been supplying the world's factories, they're not interested in talking to a guy who wants to make 6 skateboards. It's like me when I was in Home Depot, where they're like, well, I don't know, we don't make skateboards with our wood. And this is what their websites look like. They're just not very nice and not into it. So I decided that this was the opportunity. We had been working with all these enterprise companies, and finally I could solve that frustration that I had when I was like 7 years old sitting in Home Depot, is that we could make a hardware store that was inspiring and yet easy to do. Make it easy to go through this process, make it fun. Because building stuff is fun. And so we launched Inventables hardware store, the designer's hardware store, about 18 months ago. And it makes it really easy to go get all of the machines and all of the materials you need to build whatever you want. And the whole idea is that we're merchandising it around people who want to design things, people who have imaginations, and so we have things like pink passion fruit acrylic sheets, when clear just won't do it. But the real issue here is not that we built a hardware store. The real issue here is that we're trying to ignite this digital manufacturing revolution. Because I believe that as you start to see pictures like this pop up, people in this room will look at that and say, wow, this guy 3D printed a 3-bar linkage that he connected to his Arduino that he's running off his computer. And everybody else in the world looks at this, and they're like, oh, that's a hobby project. But this is what I was doing with Legos and what you all do when you're tinkering around at your house. And this is where it starts. This is where the computer started, stuff like this. And then what happens is these guys start to tell the next people who make stuff like this. So this is one of our top 10 best customers. She runs a jewelry business where she makes custom necklaces for her customers that she sells on Etsy. And she can sell those for about 15, 20, or 30 bucks, depending on the design and what the name is. And she has made a living. She makes a living doing this. This next guy takes it the next step up. So he has a shop in Dallas, right out on the Six Flags property, where you walk into his shop, and whatever you want to make, whether it's a lamp, a wallet, a sign, you tell him, he helps you, and then you walk out with the product. So these are lamps where they've like laser engraved people's names. And so these last 2 people, they order from us every month because this is their livelihood. Then I saw this. So it starts to get outside of like, okay, I hacked it together. This was done by a designer. I actually think she's in Kansas City. And she designs these things. She does it in Illustrator, and then she gets really nice bamboo and makes the clocks. And she sells them for about 60 bucks. So if you go into the normal retail store, now it's a little bit about art. And she's an artist, and she's a designer, and she's making them one at a time. And then she adds another layer of complexity to show a little bit of depth, so it starts to become more interesting. And then I saw this. So these guys were students, I think it was at Carnegie Mellon, and they designed this chair all using digital fabrication equipment. The wood is CNC milled. He used a CNC plasma cutter, and then they welded it together. This chair looks like you could buy it at the store. And it's cheaper, because his material cost is cheaper. I mean, it's not cheaper than IKEA, but it's cheaper than where you would buy a chair of that substance. And then this. So this is a Louis Vuitton, I'm not sure how to pronounce it, laser cut shoe. These go for about 1,500 bucks. So in the beginning, it was kind of a cutesy thing. But now, I just read this article, 2,238 products featuring laser cutting. These are being designed by 648 brands, not even individuals, so it doesn't count anything I've just showed you except for the last shoe, are being sold through 100 retailers worldwide. And I'm telling you, this is the first inning. This is just starting. Because what's happening now is a decoupling of the design and the fabrication. It is completely separate. You can design something in Kansas City, you can make it in Chicago, you could make it in Turkey, you could make it in Russia, all at the same time by clicking download and print. And you guys have this ultimate opportunity, which is like, if you had all of the bandwidth you ever wanted, like, what would you do with it? So I started thinking about, like, how does this relate to this digital manufacturing revolution, this decoupling of design and manufacturing? And the first 2 things that popped out is one, in-browser CAD. So this is a screenshot of Tinkercad. Right now, you can go grab it, and it would be pretty awesome with Google Fiber. The second is Autodesk 123D Catch. So earlier he was talking about ruins. They've made this app that is free. You take out your phone, and you take pictures all around an object, 30, 35 pictures. It grabs the data and uploads it to the cloud. It lets you know it's ready, and it sends you a link. You download it, and it gives you the CAD data for that object. So now you can click print, and it will replicate that object. It is unbelievable. And museums are using it to actually recreate artifacts. And designers are using it to make it a starting point. But it is free. And if you look at I saw a talk by the product manager for this, and she talked about the evolution of laser scanning, where 10 years ago it was $1 million to do this. And before theirs came out, the next best solution was 25 grand. And this free app in the App Store does a better job than the laser that they were selling for 25 grand, because it's getting more perspectives and they use a different way to decide where the points are. Unbelievable. So who's excited? I am really excited. And so I want to know who is excited about CNC milling. Okay, you, sir, just won yourself a brand new mill. So that was my Oprah moment. Get Michael your email and name. Yeah. But yeah, good luck, you guys. I'm sure you're going to blow it out of the water with this Google Fiber. Thank you very much. I guess we could take some questions, if people have questions. Yeah. Sure. So the most user-friendly ones have not come out yet, is the real answer. If you're looking for a CAM package to be user-friendly, you're going to be waiting at least a year to 2 to maybe 3. But of the ones that are out there, from a design standpoint, if you're just starting, things like Tinkercad or Autodesk 123D, I think Tinkercad is a little bit easier than 123D. HeeksCAD or OpenCAD are the free ones. Why don't you grab me afterwards, and I'll email you a list. Or you can email me. Yeah, and I'll send you a list. Go ahead.
I'm running a Lumen Lab machine right now for CNC. How's yours compare and contrast with that?
So ours is an entry-level machine. It has high precision, but it's really like the best use is to learn how to be a CNC machinist. You can do things like wood and plastic, no problem. For ours, if you want to do metal, you have to add a 4th motor, because it's just not powerful enough.
You talked about how the money scaled, but what about like certifications and licensure and things around like safety for selling?
Yeah, so maybe be more specific. What's the question?
I don't know, UL or stuff like that, where like does that, if you wanted to do something and it required that you wanted to sell it, how do you get out there and do that if you're just small?
Sure. So with our mill in particular, we sell it as a kit. And so the rotary tool, it's like a non-branded Dremel. They get the UL certification on their own. Oh, if you're designing a product. Yeah, I mean, you just have to go get it UL certified. Or in the EU, there's like a EU certification that mimics it.
Hey, Zach, if you wouldn't mind repeating the question for all the people on the live stream. You've got a question over there on the far left side.
Wait, say that again?
If you could repeat the question.
Oh, repeat the question,
yeah,
sure.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So where are we in terms of 3D printing?
Early.
Very early?
Yeah, so I think that we're somewhere in between, if the Altair, the Apple IIe hasn't come out yet, we're sort of like in between the Altair and the Apple IIe. So it's like 1979, 1981, somewhere in there. Oh, I'm sorry. So he asked, where are we in 3D printing? And I said, early, first inning.
Zach, I have a question for you. So
yeah.
Along the lines of 3D printing, I think that the price points and the barriers that you reiterated in your presentation, it's refreshing because it's one of those things where if you think about the idea of becoming an inventor, usually people think that that distance they have to travel to become one is huge, and you're certainly showing how it's much easier. 3D printing in general, take the average person in regards to, they open it up, they pull it out of the box. What's that experience like for someone getting started?
It's getting better. So the reality is that you need some sort of motivation or sort of technical wherewithal, maybe a power computer user. The MakerBot guys have done a pretty good job where they load files on an SD card. So you can actually just click the print button and print something without actually having to even plug it into your computer, which is awesome. So like when we got it, we pressed print and it printed out a bracelet. I was like, all right, that's pretty good. But I think it's got a long way to go before just anyone opens it up and like succeeds 100% of the time. Maybe next year or the year after. But in terms of price points, like the Solidoodle guys launched a $500 one, and there's one in China that's coming out that's about $300. So I think what you're going to see is application-specific printers and software. It's really a lot of a software problem at this point, more so than a hardware problem. So think about you buy this thing and then you can just print all your toys. I think toys is a really compelling application because the consequences are pretty low if G.I. Joe's doesn't look exactly perfect. And maybe that's part of it, is that you get to modify your G.I. Joe and print them out bigger, or fighting, whatever. But in the next couple of years, I think you're going to start to see ones where like you open the box and it just works perfectly.
I think we have time for a couple more questions.
Yeah, back there. So the question was, what has Inventables presence been like at Maker Faire? So this year we were at the Maker Faire in San Mateo. So GE has this project called the GE Garages Project, which is a mobile machine shop that travels all around. So it traveled to Maker Faire, and they're going to be opening them up at every GE facility, like a physical facility. They're also thinking about having more near universities. So we're actually part of the GE Garages Project, and we had a booth at Maker Faire there. We've also participated in the Detroit Maker Faire. We sponsored the Power Racing League. And I think there actually is a Kansas City team here that participated in that. And the winner of, so we donated, basically us and Spark Fund donated sponsorship dollars to make the league run this year. Yeah?
20 years ago, a big cost with traditional printing was the cartridges.
Yeah.
Is it similar with 3D filaments today? Or?
Yeah, so it's about $50 for a 1 kilogram spool of plastic. But we actually launched this year at Maker Faire with the Kaplan Foundation a prize, so where it was a competition for the first person to make a low-cost filament extruder where you just put in pellets and then it puts out filament would get $40,000, a 3D printer, and a CNC mill. And we've got 36 teams that are competing for that globally. 3 have sent in machines that didn't meet all the criteria, so we sent them back, but we think that we're going to get an answer probably in the next month or so. So somebody's going to win that. And the implication is that it will drive down, if they're able to integrate this kind of technology into these machines, it'll drive down the cost of the plastic spool from about $50 a spool to about $5 to $10 a spool. So about 10x. Yeah.
How do you see all these hackerspaces, Fab Labs, Maker Fairs, kind of, from your perspective, how do you see that coming together to get this to be a more general concept?
I think it's exploding. So in Chicago, we have a hackerspace, which is Pumping Station 1. We have a Fab Lab, which is part of like the US Fab Lab network. And then more recently than both of those things, we have a Maker Biz group that started, where people are saying like, okay, like this was a cool hobby, and I see what's going on at the Fab Lab. Like I kind of want to start a hardware business around this. And so we have it's like 60 or 80 people on the list now who are actively, so we host once a month like a meetup basically at Inventables office, and it just keeps growing and growing, and people's projects are getting more and more sophisticated, and they're talking on the list about strategies in Kickstarter and manufacturing and do-it-yourself manufacturing versus outsourcing, like all that stuff. And I think it's just a snowball that's getting bigger and bigger and bigger. When I explain what we do, if I say to someone, well, we sell 3D printers, they're like, oh, yeah, 3D printers. So like 3D printers have clearly, like that just concept it's in the mainstream. My mom and dad are sending me articles about 3D printing. So I think that it's still early, but you're going to start to, it's just going to explode and become pervasive. Yeah?
How do you see all this fitting into K-12 education?
I would love it if in K-12 you got to do this stuff. And so Dean Kamen's First Robotics is one of the best outlets across schools, no matter what district you're in. It's a great program. We donated $50,000 in product vouchers to every team, so there's like 2,500 teams. They all got gift certificates so they can go on our store and get whatever they need for their robot. But it would be amazing if there was even more of that. Because it's so accessible now, the frustration I have is there's a principal in Chicago that contacted us, and they just spent $25,000 on a mill for one school in CPS, where they could have gotten lots of them for lots of schools. And it's just, they don't even believe / understand that it's at the level that it's at the institutional level. And so I think the opportunity is to educate the leaders of the academic institutions that it's more of an entry-level, low-cost web app sort of level, as opposed to an industrial thing that we're bringing into school to train people. But I think the opportunities for training, especially at community colleges and technical colleges, are going to be off the map. And it truly is an opportunity for job growth in America, because not so much job growth, but entrepreneurial growth, where you can just start your own company. You don't need to go get a job. You need like $75 a month if you want to lease the thing, and some energy and ideas. So I think it's an awesome time to be in grade school, because when you get out, it's going to be I mean, you can do it now if you're in school. You don't even need permission. You can just go on Etsy and start up your store. Yeah.
Do you have any personal projects that you built with Inventables and stuff, or CNC?
Yeah, so I just built up an acrylic puzzle. And it was cool because there's no picture. So we sell two kinds of acrylic, one that it's glossy on both sides and one that it's matte and glossy. And so the glossy one is harder because you don't know which way they go. So I was really proud of that, especially when you put it in front of somebody, because like everybody's seen a million of those crappy little cardboard puzzles that they sell. This one looks awesome. Anybody else? Yeah.
I've been reading about 3D printing and copyright infringement and patents and stuff, especially where you can take a product, scan it, and be your own product.
Yeah.
Can you comment on that? What are you hearing in the industry? And I know they're moving towards more open standard. Any information?
Wait, so I'm sorry, what was the question?
Copyright infringement.
Oh, copyright.
In terms of like you can take a picture of a Disney and you can make your own.
Yeah. So, okay, so the question is, how is copyright infringement and trademark going to handle the fact that you can now digitally reproduce something like a Disney character? Or so I think this is an interesting time for that to be all sorted out. It's kind of like the music industry, where I don't think people know, but one of our investors emailed me that Pirate Bay already has a 3D printing channel where you can download the illegal, you can download, yeah, a car, right, like branded products. And so that just indicates to me that like if the pirates are already there, then the mainstream solution with DRM is on the way. It's actually something that we're working on. One of our advisors worked on this at Adobe, and he's helping us think through like, what is DRM going to look like in the next 5 years. But in terms of legality, I think that right now it's unclear if for personal use, if you can scan and download and print out Mickey Mouse. Is that fair use? I'm not sure. I don't know. I think that the courts are probably going to eventually decide, yes, it is, or no, it isn't. But it's definitely clear that you cannot scan, download, and print out Mickey Mouse and then sell it. I don't think Disney would look too positively on that.
Zach, we probably have time for one more question.
All right, last question. Yeah. It's hard to see because of the lights.
Question about along the regulatory
Yeah.
A lot of Kickstarter projects are kind of selling their products as like development kits. They're selling them to developers. So they don't have to go in and get all that UL certification.
Yep. That's what we did.
Do you think there's going to be some sort of startup or business solution that comes along to kind of simplify the certification process so people can have to go through all those traditional channels? Or is there just this going to just keep flying below the radar?
I don't know the answer. I was at the Kaplan Foundation yesterday, and somebody asked me, are there any regulatory challenges? So I would encourage you to go tell the Kaplan Foundation, please help us make this simpler. Because it seems like they might be able to help. But I don't really know the answer. I think that the one positive example of this, it's not exactly what you're asking, but it's sort of an analogy, is the Creative Commons and what they did to make licensing easier for all the different levels. Maybe there's an equivalent approach that could be taken. So safety is clear. Obviously, if you're selling something like a mill or a piece of electronics, there is an element of danger. So safety can be taken into account, but it can be easier to get done at a small scale. Anyway, thank you very much.
We'll be right back.